Hello again. Bernie Miklasz back with you on this Thursday in St. Louis, a little bit before 1 o'clock Central Time as I record this. Just got doing the Gas House Gang with Kevin Wheeler. You can watch that. There's a YouTube channel. We do that at KMOX, the Sports Guys. All together, all four of us do the show together on Monday, about 45 minutes. It's on YouTube. It's on all the podcast platforms. So go look for it. But, so I do Mondays, Thursday, and Friday. Thursday, on Monday, I work with everybody. On Thursday, I work with Kevin Wheeler. And Friday, I work with Matt Pauley. So we had a good discussion. And one of the things I want to get into, I kind of teased to it because we were talking about the roster and we were talking about, do the Cardinals have any trade candidates that make sense? We're talking about position players. So Wheeler and I, we shared some things on that. It's because it's an interesting discussion. So I'm going to talk about this today. And the genesis of this here on this Bernie Miklasz Show segment, and thanks for subscribing. The genesis of this was a remark that John Mozeliak made during the winter warm-up, where he said the idea is if they had to keep, or if they kept Arenado, if he was going to be a Cardinal at least for most of 2025, maybe at the trade deadline something happens, who knows? But if they have to go into the season with him, the thinking was, well, to cut costs, because you're carrying Arenado's salary is pretty big in 2025. Well, to cut costs at least somewhat, you're going to have to trade some contracts away. And most of the speculation is that, well, if you could get anybody to take Steven Matz, I think you'd have to eat a lot of the 12 plus million owed to him. But the other guy is Eric Fetty, who's actually kind of a bargain for 2025. If you're not going to trade him to cash in, if you're going to trade him just to dump salary, I don't know. I mean, his salary is reasonable for next year. It's about $7 million. So Mo said, though, he does not want to trade pitchers. It could be posturing, could be bluffing, it could be sort of sending signals out with teams that are interested in some pitchers, but he's just got to sort of put up a front. Oh, no, we don't want to trade our guys, that kind of thing. But he said, if anything, if we do anything, it would be, maybe a position player. So I'm thought, I didn't really think too much of that at the time. But then I started thinking about it. All right, if this scenario unfolds, Arenado opens the season with the Cardinals, he stays with the Cardinals all season, maybe until the trade deadline at the end of July. So if Mo would be inclined to trade a position player to perhaps cut some payroll, or maybe to fill a need, or maybe to get a prospect, who knows? Well, who would be the position player? Because it's interesting. I mean, there's not like there's a lot of choices. I mean, we're talking about reasonable choices. They're not going to trade Mason Wynn, for example. So I wanted to go through this a little bit because we do have someone in mind. And I'm also looking ahead in the future a little bit, and I'll get to this, later in the video. But at some point, they're going to have to trade a catcher because they have Herrera and they have Pages, but they also have, like in baseball prospectus, their top 10 Cardinals prospects, 3 are catchers. Jimmy Crooks, Leonardo Bernal, and then this kid that's real young with a lot of power. I think he's 19, 20 years old, named Rodriguez. 3 of their top 10 prospects are catchers. And Jimmy Crooks in particular is on the way. He's not that far away. So, there might come to a situation where you could, not this year, but next year, you could trade. You could see what you get for her if he's not better defensively. Maybe some team would covet him as a DH. So maybe smart team would move him to another position. I don't know. You trade Pages. I know they think he's Johnny Bench or whatever, but you trade him. I don't know what the return will be. So I'm going to shut up about that. But at some point, they're going to have a big time logjam at catcher. That's all I'm trying to say. So anyway, let's go through the position players, trade candidates. And I'm talking about realistic trade candidates, because for people who say, we got to trade Gorman right now, or you should trade Walker right now. No, you don't. I don't think you do that. I guess I could see a scenario where you would trade Gorman, but it'd have to be an incredible offer because he's got a lot of baseball left before he makes any kind of money. And, it's kind of, you bail out on him too quick, man. that's set up for a lot of regret. The Cardinals have gotten burned with these kind of things before. So anyway, let me shut up so I can talk some more. Position players, trade candidates. Nolan Arenado, no, because they're already trying to trade him. Willson Contreras, $18 million next year, no, because he's got a no trade clause, but he very, 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 very much wants to stay with the Cardinals and help this transition, and he means it. I can't say for sure what Brendan Donovan and Lars Nootbaar are going to make because the thing's in arbitration, but I kind of went in the middle of what the Cardinals offer and what they submitted the players. So let's just say Brendan Donovan, it's like $3 million, a little bit over $3 million. With Nootbaar, let's say it's about $2.7 million, something like that. Either way, we're not talking about a lot of money. So do you really trade Donovan to save $3 million? He's pretty valuable to your team. I would like to see him draw more walks and be a little less aggressive at the plate. I would like to see him do what he did more like in 2022 and part of 23, not worry so much about home runs. Nootbaar, we know the answer there. The records show, the facts are that when he plays, he's really good. The more he plays, the better he is. But the whole thing is for him getting into the lineup and staying there. Instead of playing 104 games a year, 105, he's got to play 145, that kind of thing. Because his value obviously is declines if he doesn't play as much as you need him to play. So maybe they would listen to offers for Donovan and Nootbaar to save some money. That just seems a little short-sighted to me. And I'm being a little selective because, again, I'm not going to propose something, kind of stupid, which is to trade, someone that's you got a lot of contract control over for many years and who's got really outstanding potential because, despite what, maybe what some other people think or whatever, Walker as a 21-year-old rookie, I did a video on this, performed very well offensively. He fell apart last year, but you don't give up on him yet. It's funny how Nolan Gorman's career, his numbers for his age up until June last season, actually were, except for the strikeouts, were actually quite good relative to age and relative to the strikeout problem. He hit for power. He had some slumps, but scored pretty well. But that nightmare stretch he went through starting June 5th last year, got everyone sour on him. And I understand that. But if you look at the totality of his career, the 17% of the plate appearances he had during this awful stretch last season, that's not, that doesn't represent who he is. If we're going to do it that way, and I'm going to do a video on this, the 83% that came before that, much better. And doesn't it make sense if you're going to say, well, who is he really other than, you got to live with strikeouts, but they'll live with strikeouts if he can hit for a lot of power. Doesn't the 83% of his plate appearances in the majors mean more as far as getting a handle on someone than 17% of the plate appearances? I think so. So again, I'm not entertaining things like flight of fancies. And by the way, we're talking specifically about position players because Mo mentioned the possibility of trading a position player. So no, not going to be Arenado, not going to be Contreras, not going to be I don't think Donovan, not going to be Nootbaar. Now, Alec Burleson, kind of interesting. But let me back up a second, but it does include Burleson. Burleson doesn't even go into the arbitration cycle until after next season, right? And Burleson can't become a free agent until 2020. No, excuse me. Let me get that right. Make sure I'm right. 2029. In fact, let's just do this real quick because I have a whole list. Like some of their young position players. Mason Wynn can't be a free agent until 2030. Brendan Donovan, not until 2028. Nootbaar, not until 2028. Gorman, not until 2029. Jordan Walker, 2030. Herrera, 2030. Ciani, 2030. Burleson, 2029. And they have a bunch of guys that won't even get, for example, I mentioned Burleson will go into arbitration after this season. Have his first. You get 3 seasons of arbitration. His first season of arbitration will be 2026. Gorman, 2026. Herrera, 2027. Pages, 2027. Sajasi, 2028. Scott, 2028. Ciani, first year of arbitration, 2027. Walker, 2027. Wynn, 2027. And they're the only guys that position players are. So in other words, you have really great cost control over these guys for a really good long time, even before some of them get to arbitration. So if the idea is to have more payroll efficiency, as Bill DeWitt has said, and he did it before, and he's trying to do it again after a delay, and that's his fault, you have a lot of young, good, cost-controlled players. That's really good for your payroll, because then you can go out and acquire veterans that you need who have bigger salaries. The Cardinals did that in the past a lot. Well, they did it a lot with recently, in a way, Goldschmidt in 2019, Arenado in 2021. And this isn't a referendum on how that worked out. I'm just telling you, they went out and made those trades. So Burleson is interesting me as a trade candidate, except I don't know how much trade value he really would have. There's a situation where I'm just going to give you the basics. I'm not going to review every single thing. You go to baseball, you go to StatCast, baseballsavant.com, go to StatCast. Like they give you just like a general rating for different departments of his performance. Base running value, terrible. They don't say terrible, but he's in the like a really bad percentile, among the very worst. Fielding run value, among the very worst in the majors. Batting run value, he's above average, but it's not all that much. I think if anybody would call him average batting run value, that wouldn't be erroneous. Maybe not technically precise, but it wouldn't be erroneous. The good news is he doesn't strike out. You know, he's actually in the top 4% of major league hitters for lowest strikeout rate. He doesn't swing and miss much. He's in the top 19% of major league hitters that don't swing and miss a lot. But the bad news is he chases way too much. He swings outside of the strike zone way too much. He's in the bottom 14% of major league hitters in chasing pitches out of the strike zone. He just swings at everything, and he doesn't have the discipline to just wait for his strikes and hit strikes. As Matt Carpenter taught him to do, and Burleson did it for a good while last year. He really did, and he had an exceptional June and July, and August wasn't bad either. But then he started to taper off, and he had a really lousy September, and he was pretty lousy early in the year. So it's nice to say, well, gosh, he's got like 12.8% strikeout rate. I mean, boy, you can't find those guys. But if he's getting himself out, so to speak, by chasing stuff out of the strike zone, making contact with it, a lot of soft contact, that kind of thing, he's doing the pitchers a favor. So it's kind of a mixed bag with him. And let me go to this next page if I can find it. The other thing about Burleson is, from a standpoint of like, do the Cardinals need him, or do other teams need him, and like how would he be used? How would the Cardinals use him? So on and so forth, right down the line. And I was looking this up earlier, and let me go to my screen here. Although you're not going to see me going to my screen, although I ought to show you that. I ought to try to figure out a way to do that, but I'm still looking at you in the camera. I haven't lost you. Let me just give you a couple more things about Burleson. As I said, he's 26 years old. First arbitration season's 2026, free agency 2029. So what about where he's lined up? Where has he lined up? Like how many of he has 995 career plate appearances. Were they spread around in terms of what position he played? 51% of them have been either playing left field or right field. 33% have been as DH, 12% at first base. Last season, 595 plate appearances. He had 29% in right field, 20% in left field. So if you put left field and right field together, that's 49%. But he DH'd 40% of the time, played first base 10% of the time. Fielding. Believe it or not, according to defensive run saved in his, he's only played 250 innings at first base, but he's a plus fielder. It's +2. I'm not getting carried away. I'm just saying he's actually been okay there. But in left field, 539 innings, he's a -3 fielder. Right field, even worse, 474 innings, -6. And I told you about some of his other negatives. Other negatives is he can't hit left-handed pitching. I've had people say, well, if you look at his minor league splits, he hit left-handed pitching pretty well. I'm sorry, but the major leagues aren't the minor leagues. And his numbers, I'm not going to bore you with stats and go overboard with stats. Just take my word, his numbers in the major league against left-handed pitchers, not very good. He hits right-handed pitching really well. Now, at the end of last year when he ran out of gas, and that's the other thing, you have to wonder about his conditioning. You have to wonder if he can go from the starting gate to the finish line strong most of the way. It's just a legitimate question. So when he faded down the stretch, like mostly, let's just say the final month, his numbers against right-handed pitching dropped because he just seemed to be out of gas, right? But he's got a good track record against right-handed batters, right-handed pitchers. I'm sorry. If you look at it, like last season, really good numbers. I won't read them. Just take my word for it. Really, really good numbers against right-handed pitchers. And I think that's where some of his value would be. And then you look at last year, this is the guy, if you could get him like you could get 5 months of this instead of just 3 months of this, then you'd say, well, I don't know about trading him. But in June, July, and August, 307 at bats, he slugged 476. He had 16 home runs. He was about 21% above the league average offensively. His OPS was 799. So, and if you look just to June and July, he was about 25% above the league average with a lot of power. So, and those numbers were even better against right-handed pitching because he sees right-handed pitching more often than lefties, to say the least. It's not even worth talking about. So you're set up. Listen, it isn't that I'm like, yeah, Burleson's a bum, get rid of him. That's not what I'm saying here. I'm just saying if John Mozeliak is offered that he might consider trading a position player, it's not going to be Arenado because they're already trying to trade him. Not going to be Contreras. I would be surprised if it's Donovan or Nootbaar, unless they're included in one of them is included in a much larger deal that would get them a couple prospects they really want or something like that. I don't know. I don't do fantasy GM trades. You can do that if you. I just don't do it. It bores me. So another reason why, like, if Burleson wasn't on the team in 2025, they'd be fine. They have guys they could use as, a fourth outfielder. They can roll some people through DH. Like if Arenado is not going to be traded, Gorman would play second base, but he could also be used a lot at DH. And there's a lot of guys that could just take shifts at DH. Although Burleson, I guess technically you'd assume would be the DH, especially if Arenado's traded. Most of his at-bats would come to the DH because you don't want to play him in the outfield because he's really not good out there defensively. But is he expendable? I think he is, especially if Arenado's here in 2025. And another reason why he's expendable, and let me just run this by you real quick. They've got some outfielders that are getting closer to the big leagues. Chase Davis, who was their first round draft pick a couple of years ago. He's only 23 years old. He's a left-handed batter, and he started to figure some things out last season. And I think he's turned a corner. Not saying he's going to be a superstar, just saying you drafted him first. He's starting to make progress. There's stuff to like. He still has to prove some things, but he's not that far away. They have a guy that I know a lot of you have really been interested in seeing, a left-handed batter, an outfielder who last year put up some really good numbers in AAA. Matt Koperniak, and I always say his name wrong, but you know who I'm talking about. He's ready for a major league opportunity as a reserve. They sort of have a quiet sleeper prospect and someone they drafted in maybe 2023. It doesn't matter. When I say they drafted, I'm referring to the last 3 years. Nathan Church, another left-handed batter. From what I read, he can play all three outfield positions. There was a kid they drafted in the second round back in 2021, a high school kid, Joshua Baez, right-handed batter. He's about 21 and a half years old now. And he started to kind of figure some stuff out last year. Like he did relative to what he was doing before, he did pretty well at the low A level, and then they moved him up to the higher A level in Peoria, and his numbers weren't as good, but he was kind of holding his own. He does strike out a lot though, but he's a guy they like, and he seems like he's starting to figure it out. Another guy, someone they drafted in 2023, I believe, Travis Honeyman, who's a right-handed bat. Just go to Baseball Reference and look up his numbers in the minors so far. This dude can hit, and he's a right-handed batter. I can't imagine he would be all that far away if this is a year of giving young players opportunities. They've got some guys that are on the cusp or getting close to it. And then a little longer down the line, remember they signed a player out of, I do believe it's Korea, and I apologize if I'm wrong about that. Wanbin Cho, 21 years old now, left-handed batter. He's got power, very raw, and it really, his adjustment to professional baseball in America in the minor leagues, it's taken him some time, but again, showing signs of getting some things figured out. My point isn't to saying they have a collection of future all-stars coming up, outfield. I'm not saying that, but they have some guys. If you're going to draft and develop players, they got to get opportunities. And I'm just saying, you got some guys, since John Mozeliak likes to talk about the runway, they got some guys like, they got some planes on that runway waiting for takeoff. That's what I'm saying. They got a lot of them. So, you just can't keep them in the minors forever. So in that context, Burleson is expendable because they do have a wave of young outfielders getting close to having a chance. And then after that, there's more. Like, some of the younger ones I mentioned on the list I just gave you, they're not in the picture for 2025, but then they would be the next wave. And who knows who else is going to develop between now and then. And then there's also the idea that some of you have had, which is a good one. Thomas Sajaci ought to get some turns in spring training playing corner outfield. That's another way you could cover Burleson not being here, right? So is he expendable? Yeah, I think he is. Because 2025 is not about, well, we have to, he's one of our better hitters against right-handed pitching. So we got to be really, really careful about trading him. Listen, you got to give opportunities to a lot of players. Some who are just about knocking on the door, talking about those outfielders. Burleson, the only thing is he's not going to be making big money. He's not going to be making much money at all this year. And then he doesn't go to arbitration until 2026. Then he'll start to make some money. So I don't know how much you save, but what you might do is sort of do something to ease a looming logjam again in the outfield. Now, again, if they want to take calls for Nootbaar or Donovan, we'll take calls to see what other teams have to say. Like, I'm not John Mozeliak. I can't sit here and say, well, they should do this and they should do that. A lot of it has to do with what you're going to get in return and whether what someone offers you is something that truly captivates you and entices you, or whether it's just kind of like, not bad. That's the stuff we don't know. It's easy to say, trade this guy, trade that guy. What we don't know is what you're going to get in return or how much value he really has in the eyes of other teams. Because when we talk about Burleson's base running bad, fielding bad, can't hit lefties, all that stuff. Well, other teams see that too, right? His speed, the fact that his play, he swings at way too many pitches. They know all this stuff too, but he could be a good specialist for a team that really needs a DH to play against right-handed hitters. I don't have a list of those teams. I didn't have time to do that much research. Like, well, who could use a left-handed batter to punish right-handed pitchers? But I'm sure some teams would have some interest because 70%, 72% of the plate appearances in every season in modern times, going back 7-8 years, but really the last 5-6 years, 70%, 72% of the plate appearances in the major leagues are taken against right-handed pitchers. So in that context, Burleson would have some value. Anyway, I think I went through all of this the way I wanted to go through all of this. The other thing is if Arenado stays, I've talked about this before, you play Donovan in left. You try Nootbaar out in center. You got some other people you could use Mike Ciani as your fourth outfielder. Victor Scott probably needs a little more time in Memphis. that in that scenario, moving Donovan to left field, Gorman's at second, does some DH time. Nootbaar getting a look at center field where he hasn't been bad, not as good as Siani, but that's why you have a thing called defensive replacements, right? In that scenario, that's another reason that would show that Burleson is expendable. That, I'm not saying he's worthless. I'm not saying get rid of the bum, just saying he would be expendable. So maybe that's who Mozeliak was referring to. Don't know. It seems logical. So that concludes my preliminary report of trying to identify this position player he's talking about. Realistic position player, not Judy in the sky with diamond stuff, right? All right, I got to run. Thank you. I'm very interested in your comments to see what you think about who. Burleson, you like the idea? Disapprove? Just tell me how you feel, because I think this is a good thing to talk about. It's something different, but it's also pertinent because of what Mo said. All right, take care.